Hello again and welcome back to my channel and welcome to the Troutman Photography and SmashCake.com photo studio. And today's video is a follow-up on last week's video where I introduced you guys to a very budget-friendly and very effective one light setup for SmashCake photography. So in today's video, what we're going to do is walk you guys through step by step on how to put this together and how to go ahead and get it all set up with your camera so that there are no mistakes. With that all being said, let's get into the first thing you need to do to set up your light. The first thing you're going to want to do is, of course, attach the light to the light stand that we talked about last week. And those of you with a very keen eye, you're going to notice that this is not the light that we talked about last week. This is the Flashpoint AD600 and not the Godox MS300. And the reason for that, of course, is that I have since upgraded at my studio. This is not a budget-friendly light like the one from last week's video, and it's battery operated, so we won't have a cord getting in the way of today's demonstration. Okay, let's get the light set up by making sure it's in manual mode. So hit the mode button until you see the M. Now after that, we want to make sure it's in group A, so hit the group channel button and cycle through the groups until you hit group A. That you're going to hold down the group channel button and cycle using this dial until you are on channel 1. And that's pretty much how you set up your light. So now I want to save you guys some time by showing you this cool little trick to get the diffusion panel stuck to your light. Now grab the collar, and you'll know it's the collar when you see this plastic little nubbin. And then go ahead and grab your umbrella, and well, there's nothing fancy to it. You're going to just jam it in the hole. And once it's in there, what you're going to do is go ahead and open that umbrella. What's going to happen here is that diffusion panel will magically stick to the front of your modifier, saving you all sorts of time and frustration. You're welcome. All right, to mount the modifier to your light, just simply stick the umbrella rod through the hole that is under your light and make sure your diffusion panel is on. Now, I just took it off because I want to show you this one thing. If you put the light too deep into the umbrella, what happens is the light doesn't spread. You'll notice that the light there is not covering the full width of the umbrella. Now, the problem with that is that you're not getting the soft light that you could be getting if you simply back the light out of the inside of the umbrella or slide the rod away from the light. And what you're going to find out there is that the light spreads out a whole lot more. And as we all know, the bigger the light source, the softer the light. So if you want the softest light possible, just make sure that your light isn't too far to the inside of the umbrella. So now it's time to go ahead and turn our attention to the radio trigger. And what we're going to do is go ahead and use the hot shoe. We're going to slide it right in and then turn that little dial to tighten it securely in place. And then and only then do we turn on our camera and the radio trigger. Never adhere the trigger to the camera while either the trigger or the camera is on. There might be a bit of a power surge and it might cause you some potential problems. Now, the first thing you want to do is make sure the channel is on the same channel as your light. So hold down the ZM/CH button until you see the highlighted channel section, and then simply use the wheel to dial in your selected channel. And don't forget to hit the set button when you're all done. Oh, the next thing that you need to do is you need to select group A, which is the group that our light is in, and hit the mode button until you see manual and hit set when you're done. I'll go ahead and give the test flash button a little flick and you should see the light flashing. At this point, you are completely dialed in and that trigger should have full control over your light. So go ahead and give it a shot. Try dialing the power up and down and popping off a few test flashes to make sure that it works. All right, so the light modifier is doing its thing. You've got the trigger popping, everything's working. The next step is to dial in your camera settings. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and build a small SmashCake set behind me, and I'll walk you guys through step by step how to do just that. All right, before we get started, I want to point out that we are in a very large room with a very large bank of windows. There they are right there. Now, those windows run the entire length of this entire room, and it does make it a little impossible to control the light. So my first recommendation to you guys is to go ahead and take these pictures and get started with your flash in a darker environment. Okay, so we've got our laughable SmashCake set here. It's pretty ugly. I do apologize. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to turn on our light and put it into position. Now, the position for today's light doesn't really matter. Let's just say that this guy's nose is pointing towards the camera, which is at 6 o'clock on a clock dial, right? And we want the light to be at either 7 or 5. Now, that's going to go ahead and get us started. But believe me, where to put the light, well, that is a complete topic that really deserves its own video. So for today, let's just put the light at 7 or 5, your choice. Okay, so here's the back of my camera. And the first thing that I like to do when working with Flash in the studio is I like to set my ISO as low as possible. Now, the Sony can go all the way down to ISO 50, but I'm just going to assume that you guys have a different camera brand, and usually 100 is about the universal ISO. Now, with the ISO, you want to use the lowest available ISO you have in your camera, because the higher the ISO, the more noise that's going to be introduced into your images. For example, the camera that I use in my studio is the Sony a7R III. If I go above like maybe 1000 ISO, I start to see noticeable noise, and that will affect print quality, and it just doesn't look that great. So whenever possible, I use the lowest ISO possible, and since we're using Flash in the studio, well, we can get away with ISO 100 or lower if it's available on your camera. Now, as you can see, what you're looking at there is almost a black frame, which is exactly what we want. We want to go ahead and cancel out all of the ambient light in this room. We don't want any light but the light coming out of our flash to be what hits the sensor of our camera, okay? So all of this beautiful light that's bouncing around this room, we need to come up with some camera settings that will kind of dim this down and darken this down as much as possible so that we have full control over the light. So just think of all of this beautiful ambient light as light pollution, and we need to neutralize it. Now, the next camera setting that I like to adjust is the f-stop, and that's because the f-stop really does a lot of heavy lifting when deciding what your image looks like. Now, if you use an aperture like 1.8, your subject will be very much in focus and your background will be nice and blurry. And if you use, say, f22, well, your subject will be in focus and so will your background. So what you need to do is decide how blurry you want your background and pick an aperture that kind of corresponds with that. Now, my preferred aperture when I was beginning in smash cake photography was f4. Now, the reason for this is that if I shot at f2.8 or 1.8, a lot of times the baby would move. And then that would result in a lot of my images being out of focus, translation being unsellable. So I found the sweet spot there was f4 because it gave me a blurry background. But if the baby moved just a little bit, or I moved just a little bit, there was enough leeway there for me to still get a tack sharp image. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go ahead and pick aperture f4.0, and we're going to use that. Now, as you can see, the screen is getting darker and darker. Now, the shutter speed is the last one. It's located right here, and each one of your cameras has what is called a sync speed, and that is the speed in which the flash can deliver a full burst of flash and get it between the opening and shutting curtains that exist in your camera. Now, if you set a shutter speed too high, what's going to happen is they're going to be out of sync. And that first curtain will open, flash will fire, and then this one will move too fast, and that light will be caught on the other side of the curtain and will not reach your sensor, resulting in a black bar across your frame. So what you have to do is you have to understand what your camera's sync speed is. Now, to find that out, of course, that's going to be in your camera manual, or you can check out your manufacturer online. They will have the listed sync speed for you available somewhere. And when working with flash that does not have high-speed sync, it is imperative that you don't set your shutter speed faster than the sync speed in your camera. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is turn your attention to the trigger, and you want to make sure that group A is selected, and you want to go ahead and turn the dial counterclockwise till it reaches 1256 or the lowest power. And then we're going to go ahead and take a quick test frame, and we're going to review the image. All right, well, I don't know about you guys, but that looks a little underexposed for my taste. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and dial in some more power into our flash. Okay, so to dial in more power to our flash, what we need to do is hit A and then rotate this dial clockwise. Let's go ahead and bring it up to 116. Hit the set button in the middle of the dial and take another test frame. Now go ahead and review that image again, and if it's still not enough power, let's go ahead and try adding a little bit more. We'll go quarter power, hit set, and we'll take another test frame. And just keep doing that until ultimately you end up with an exposure to your liking. All right, everybody, well, you watched me walk that power up until we had a properly exposed image, and it did take some time, and it did take some test frames. Now, if you want to avoid all of that, I highly suggest you pick up a light meter. Now, I'm going to go ahead and list a couple of these light meters that I've used personally down below. I highly recommend you check them out. And if you are picking up flashes, you are going to need one of these, especially if you're a beginner. So think about picking one up and supporting this channel. So I completely understand if you guys have questions. Today's topic was a lot to digest. So if you do, don't be afraid to ask me in the comment section down below. I am really good about answering those things, and I really do enjoy it. Now, it is time for me to clean up my toys and get the heck out of here. So don't forget to check out the end screen with more videos like today's video. And until next week, I'm Daniel Troutman with thesmashgeek.com and troutmanphotography.com. And I just want to say thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye.